Good morning, LinkedIn. Happy Monday. Welcome to another edition of Let's Build Your HubSpot Map with Brian Ossa. How you doing, man?
What's up, everyone? Doing fantastic. Happy, excited Monday morning. And, like we were just chatting about a few minutes ago, I just had a massive Claude breakthrough. So I'm really happy about that. And yeah, it's a good day.
Always fun to have those breakthroughs.
Heck yeah.
Hopefully, they'll never lose their luster, but I think it's gonna be a while. Um,
Yeah.
but it's pretty hard to take advantage of those if you don't have something to build on. We're never going to stop saying that. I can tell you that
hmm
for sure. Uh, Maybe someday you're asking Claude to just build that part, but you're still going to have to build the foundation that we're going to describe today. A great episode last week going through the different, maturity models of a business. So maybe you could start there, give us a quick recap of the different levels, and then, we're going to start to talk about that level one, just getting started.
Sounds good. Yeah. So for those of us who didn't join us last week, essentially we went over the core structure of what I'm classifying as maturity models. And they're associated with your business of just like different points you are in time. And they go all the way up from 1 to 5. And essentially, maturity level 1 is, think of it like your solopreneur or your freelancer, someone who's very small, usually just themselves, maybe one other person, and you're bringing in money, you're doing it on your own. That's awesome, but you haven't really gotten things super organized in order to grow and scale yet, but you want to. That's kind of where you are at level 1. Level 2 is maybe you have some foundations put in place. You might have a couple people on your team, but everything you're doing, you have some redundancies, and whether that's technology related or operationally related, and things are kind of operating independently, but at the same time, but also they're doing the same thing. Again, you see where I'm going here and how I'm repeating myself? That's by design because everything is redundant. And so level 2 is cleaning a lot of those things up so you can really scale further once you're kind of in that, you're starting at that 7 figure ARR realm. Level 3 is essentially you have a lot of those foundations put into place, but you're now ready to go from a team of, maybe a dozen people or 20 people. You want to get this up to 100 and start going from that $1 to $3 million to like 10 million ARR, maybe 50 million ARR. And it's all about refining that and streamlining everything you can the best of your ability. And level 4 is taking that above and beyond to an enterprise level. And that's when you start looking at those much larger companies. And I added 5 just to keep that nice round number, but 5 isn't really a business classification as much as it is an approach to just further optimization and advanced techniques. So things that we're going to be talking about there will be, there'll be a lot involved, like prompt engineering and analysis, as well as like more advanced HubSpot workflows, tips, tricks, and things that you can really use at any point throughout your business, in all honesty, but tend to be more effective the larger and more refined you are.
Yeah, and I like that continuous innovation, uh, like the way you're defining it, because it can happen at any level. It's just when you think about now, if you want to be on the cutting edge and actually leverage, new opportunities and advanced technologies and techniques, you have to have some sort of flexibility, agility, in your organization. And this space between like 1 and 3, where you have scalability or you don't, really impacts that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't have that, if everything's redundant and there's a lot of change management to be had every time you want to do something new, like it's really hard to, be on the front lines of leveraging stuff. And I think AI is a good example of that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll try not to overtake every show with AI stuff, but uh, I'm not going to be hiding it from you guys either. It's something
Yeah.
important, and I'm sure it'll come up in this series as well.
Nice. Yeah, that's And that's exactly right. And that's why we're starting here at this maturity level one aspect. And we're going to be spending a few weeks in each one of these categories and then probably bringing it all together in the long run. But ultimately, having the structure around these maturity levels is going to be the core of our show going forward. And so, with that in mind, it's funny that you mention AI because building that level of efficiency and using the tools that you can to maximize your output while I don't want to say minimizing your input, but being most efficient with your input is really what they're designed to do. And that's a key thing when you're getting started as a business. So let's look at that very operationally from an organizational standpoint. Right now, your business, you're starting with effectively nothing. And well, I don't want to say effectively nothing, but you're trying to get yourself in a position that you can grow and start handing things off. Where do you begin? And that's a question that I know a lot of people face. And the first thing that comes to mind, and like from my capacity, is what I refer to as the tripod. And probably you'll probably see this or hear this from me all the time if you haven't already. But the tripod is essentially strategy, operations, and technology. You need all three of those to run your business, and no one can operate without the other two, and they all fuel each other. The ability to do it effectively is when you have all three of them kind of working in tandem with each other, very similar in the way to the flywheel model works, in that you're able to just like continually self propagate inbound traffic. So let's start off with a question to you, Chris. Actually, is just how would you define each one of those categories? And then we can kind of like we'll use that as a jumping off point for diving deep into each one and go and see what you need to have put into place to get started.
Good question. Uh, I think, I don't think any of this like should be new as we start to describe it. But I appreciate what you're doing as far as since it might not be new, but businesses are still having trouble like
Put-
executing
Putting it
on
into
all the
words.
things, right?
Yeah.
Um, and maybe focusing on operations and technology, but forgetting about strategy.
Hmm.
And just like you can get away with that for some amount of time when you make a really great product and you've got a customer network, right? But at some point when you're not strategic, the market changes and you no longer have a business, or
Hmm.
um, you're not supporting your people and they go away. So the way that all these three work together, think about it. What came to mind first as we hear about like people, process, and technology. Um, so I think there's various ways to, you know, define this stuff for an organization. Um, and I think as I look at, like some of the list of how to's that you have here in the knowledge base, it's that's where it's the rubber is going to meet the road in terms of how each different organization
Hmm.
is going to approach this. The key is that you got to do all of it, like whether you want to or not, if you're trying to get to the next level, right? And really, if it's just you or you and one other person, like maybe you don't have to hit all these because you're just
Hmm.
naturally going to do them. But as soon as you try to grow, right, you've got to have this stuff ready to go. And what I've seen most, like in my experience, is the growth happens first.
Hmm.
You experience all the pain of, okay, maybe we're trying to grow in this market. People aren't resonating with the message in the same way.
Hmm.
Maybe we need to figure out what our value actually is,
Hmm.
right? So that's where there are ways to be proactive about this, and that's what we mean by setting the foundation. Like instead of building out half the house first, uh, let's get some foundational stuff done.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge point to keep in mind because you kind of leaned into the strategy pillar a little bit more than the other two, which is very natural. And I think it makes a lot of sense to do that. And that's the way to be thinking about this most effectively. It's to lean into that strategy model a little bit more at first, because all too often the cycle that happens is, oh my gosh, I need to do the thing. How do I do the thing? And then you're just going to grab, like you're going to kind of figure out, okay, well, here are the steps I need to do, operations. And then you're like, okay, well, here's theoretically how I need to do it. How do I solve that? I'll grab this tool, technology. And then you kind of iterate through it. And then you figure out after the fact, like, oh, shoot, I should probably have a process for it. Oh, new thing. Okay, let's start over and go operations technology. And you've done this several times. And while you may have thought about like the strategic approach for it, chances are is that it only lives in one place, and that's your head. And when it lives in your head, you can't scale. Like it's impossible, because when you're working with it, when you're working in this business, you need to be able to just bring on additional personnel. You need to offer additional services. And in order to do that, the value proposition is what you are providing. So you need to take what's in your head and put it in a way that is understandable. And my advocacy for that is very much building an internal knowledge base. And I cannot emphasize how valuable that is enough from pretty much the get go. And if you take nothing else away from this, pretty much just use that as an example of just create a workflow sheet of here's what I do, here's a high level of how to do it, and here's why I do it. That's really all you need as a foundation. And you can throw all of that in like a Google Doc. Uh, Last week, Google actually released their new feature set for Google Docs, and now they have the ability to tabulate your individual within an individual doc, so you can actually create an entire robust knowledge base in a single Google Doc just by using effective headering structures. And when you're doing that, that's already a great foundation for keeping things organized on your behalf. And then you can start thinking about how you want to approach this thing, and then lean more into that strategic aspect, so that you're not even looking at the operations or technology side of things until you understand why and how am I doing this. And that in turn will offer you a number of benefits, but primarily it's going to address that growing pain that you were talking about, Chris. Because a lot of times that when these things break down and there's a redundancy in process, a redundancy in technology, or just friction in adopting something, it's because the logic either is unfounded for why you're using it, or was not communicated effectively enough. And so if you come out with that plan and you only do something when you need to do something and you justify that, you're going to be more effectively able to roll out a process or a piece of technology. So,
Hmm.
bringing that full circle and just kind of wrapping up my monologue here, is that the approach, like that approach, applies the same with what you're doing for your technology stack. And that's why we live and preach a lot of things around HubSpot, as well as having like a project management tool, a communications tool, as well as a way to kind of run your operations finance. That is all you need to start. Don't adopt any more than one of those things.
Yeah. And this is that last piece you mentioned is why Microsoft Office Suite and
Mm-hmm.
Google Suite have been so adoptable from a
Mm-hmm.
business perspective. Like you have these different things like Excel and Word and PowerPoint that can kind of create documentation and help with process, right? But when they're individual files and everybody's editing separately, like it's outside of a system.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that. And like to your earlier description of what's happening here, I mean, so often, I'm sure the most common way of reactive, development of a business, and it can look very reactive, but the best ones do it in a very strategic, proactive way,
Hmm.
where it's like, I don't know exactly what you want. I think you do. So we're going to develop some prototypes, bring it to market, bring it to, some early possible adopters, get their feedback, and then build the product. Instead, what happens? Like, I think I figured out what you want. I'm building a product. Then I'm going to sell it to you. It's not exactly what you want, but I will make whatever you want. So you tell me what you want. I develop a brand new product. And then in that moment, maybe even after you pay me, I develop all the process, get all the tools, required. And
Hmm.
that was, it's always hard for me to feel like I have expertise because I've never, it's, I have not had a ton of experiences at businesses that have done it in this way,
Hmm.
like in the proactive way. I've seen a lot of doing it the other way,
Reactive.
right?
Yes.
And the challenges that that creates, the lack of scalability. You know, one of my first bosses was so good at developing products in the moment, like in response. That's how he built the business,
Hmm.
right? But when you just keep doing that over and over, and then you just miss developing the market for it, for the thing that you just made, like you're in this endless like hamster wheel. Also, you don't ever realize the full value
Hmm.
of the thing that you developed, because if one person's asking for it, there's probably 10 or 100 more that want it, right? If you do the strategy up front, you can usually figure that out, and then you build scalable process, bring in scalable tools, so it's not just me copying 100 spreadsheets over and over to service orders, right? That's why we talk about this stuff, and that's why it's laughable for me when people think they need to be at a certain level to use free HubSpot,
Hmm. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's
You're
crazy.
You're exactly right. And that's kind of the HubSpot aspect of it. And we were going back earlier to talking about the different maturity models. And if you want to put the HubSpot framework around it, maturity level 1, you're using HubSpot free tools. Maturity level 2, you're at starter tools, maybe some pro features. Maturity level 3, you're using pro. Maturity level 4, you're using enterprise. Everything beyond that is just advanced implementation of those different suites. That's really a good framework, and you don't need to follow that completely rigidly. And what I mean by that is that if you find yourself in like mostly maturity level 1, but you're comfortable with your sales process and you want to adopt HubSpot Sales Pro, go for it. Or if you find yourself in maturity level 3, but you're still using Operations Hub Free or Operations Hub Starter, like that's fine. Like there's nothing wrong with any of that. It's just the mentality of just how you're using these tools, but being able to use them effectively all comes back to that strategic approach and thinking about it first. And so that's why when you're looking at it, what is one of the biggest things that you start running into once you start trying to scale? It's probably going to be your sales process as well as your handoff process to actually fulfillment. And
Process
so
gaps, like
exactly.
100%.
And so what do you usually do when that happens? You're going to reach out to someone who can build you a sales process. You're going to reach out to someone who can build you a client onboarding process. Usually, if well, I wouldn't say usually, but if you're thinking about it the right way, that should be done by the same person. Because if you have your onboarding and handoff process and client management process run by one person and your sales process developed by another, it's that much more of an opportunity for a disconnect unless the person knows what they're talking about, in which case that's fantastic and there's plenty of people in that capacity out there. So when you come to do that, just a good way to approach is just put together a diagram that's just like, okay, well, what do I need to be thinking about throughout the entire sales process? And when I say sales process, I'm I'm not just talking about from the time that they reach out to you and say, hey, let's schedule a meeting. I'm talking about from the time that they've never heard of you. How are you going to get them to hear about you? How are you going to get them to grow that interest in you? How are you going to get them to reach out and have a conversation with you? What are those follow up conversations like? What does that actual closing process looks like? What does that handoff look like? All of those are facets that you probably want to be paying attention to early on, because the sooner that you're able to get that dialed down and to put into place, the sooner you're able to start thinking about the most important part of your business, and that is your unique value proposition. Because if you don't have that defined, you're you're already setting yourself up to struggle in the future, because you're going to spend way too much time iterating on that. And then when you go to have a sales call, one day you may say, oh, I do this, and then the very next call that's 5 minutes later is, oh, I do that, and you're already creating some conflict, and you no longer have a way to kind of repeat that. And I'm guilty of it. I still do that now. I know I do, and that's just because, you know, I have a variety of, I know I have the neurodiversity going on in my brain. I know I don't always think it all straight. It is what it is, and that's fine. But the easier that you can kind of keep things on that railroad track to simplify your life, the much more scalable and more sanity saving that's going to be.
Yeah. Oh, and this is where the process gap comes into play, because as soon as you try to transfer that knowledge or process to somebody else,
Yep.
like they don't have documentation to lean on. Like I'm the same way, where that's one of my favorite things about AI right now
Hmm.
is, and like if you're a founder, or like the lead product, the tech, the tech, the technologist, whoever's creating the thing that is the value, right? You've got all the knowledge, you've got all the answers to these questions in your head, right? Because you're the one that's been talking to people, you're the one that's been
Hmm.
selling it, probably. And you're probably not great at documentation. Like that's why you're in that role, because
Hmm.
you're great at getting people on board with a vision and then delivering value, sometimes with just words, right?
Hmm.
Uh, but when you can just take take any conversation where you confirm the value with the person you're talking to, take the transcript, put it into GPT or Claude, it will
Hmm.
tell you what the UVP is, what the unique value prop is. It will do that 3 times. It will tell you if there's any inconsistencies, if those inconsistencies are good or bad based on what the other person was saying.
Hmm.
Like there's been worksheets, like there's been workbooks and trainings on how to do this forever. It feels like a lot of work, like Academy, bless their hearts, but I don't know how many downloaded PDFs I have that we're just going
Hmm.
to be like, oh, this is going to be great to go through. If I just go through this, all this stuff that we're talking about right now will be done. Uh,
Hmm.
but then you don't do it because it takes time and it's not fun and it's
We did
right.
the one of them on this show not too many months ago.
Yeah, exactly. And now you can just like, this is where the recording of what you're doing, whether it's
Hmm.
a live call or you're just recounting what happened to the AI in this case,
Hmm.
like just give up the reins a little bit, ask for help, and know that you have options. And these are the options I've seen when it comes to process gaps. So we either fill them in with tools, right? Or we fill them in with people,
Hmm.
right? And inside sales teams and teams specifically for quoting because it's so complex and we don't, right? That's what comes to mind, right? And instead of trying to build a better process, which closes the gap, or create a new process, which maybe now a tool like can handle effectively, instead of asking the tool to solve the strategy gap or process gap for you, which is
Hmm.
what often people do with HubSpot, right?
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that, if you're not really sure where to start with that, Honestly, there's nothing wrong with, I don't know if this is actually visible, it's too bright. There's nothing wrong with a diagram, and this is nothing special. This is literally my wife and my food bot, because one of our biggest challenges is figuring out where to go to frickin' go to frickin' dinner on the few nights that we decide to eat out. I want to simplify that. And so we're like actively building that. But the first step of it is I don't want to just start building that out because like I don't fully know what I want it to be. So we were at dinner the other night. We're just like, all right, let's just start sketching this silly thing. And now we have the framework behind it. And now I'm going to throw that into Claude probably this week and say, here's what I'm thinking of, help me refine it. And then using that, I'm going to have the ability to build out the bot, which I'm going to likely be building on ChatGPT once I have it all refined and good to go. And yes, I'm well aware this is a silly example and not remotely business related, but I don't care. But it's a good example of showing just you're taking this conversation and idea, you're putting it into a, okay, how could this theoretically work? And then explaining, all right, well, next steps, here's how you can start refining all of that. And then once you refined what that strategy looks like, you've inherently built a process around it just through the experience of going through that strategy. Then you just implement it using your tool, and you're done. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, I know. But again, like
Well,
you got to get start. You start somewhere.
right. And that's where like what you just described with the bot is not that much different. Like you still, I would imagine, to build that, there's specific variables that relate to what do we like, what do we
Mm-hmm.
not like,
Mm-hmm.
what's working, what's not working, what do we want to do more of, what do we want to do less of. It's like every after action review or any kind of process management, quality management thing you've ever done before. It's like every interaction with the customer should go through that lens. You quickly figure out what's working and can we do more of it? Should we do more of it? What happens to the organization when we do more of it?
Mm-hmm.
What's not working? Why isn't it working? Should we do less of it? Do we need the same people or tools if we don't do it anymore?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Things like that. And that's where I think coming back to like when we're first starting, putting all these things that you could be doing on the same playing field and same like using similar common language, I think is so important because oftentimes, like whenever we get to the budget conversation around
Mm-hmm.
HubSpot, it's just so frustrating because there's lots of things that we pay for in the business, like accounting software and maybe an HR relationship, somebody managing our insurance policies for us. There's lots of
Mm-hmm.
things that are just seen as, oh, the cost of doing business, right? Until you see a CRM or a customer platform like HubSpot as the cost of doing business,
Mm-hmm.
like the challenge is hard. So when you're thinking about what is the cost of me using this thing, and if I'm going to increase, like the same reason I pay somebody to take care of insurance and benefits is because I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to learn, and I don't want to spend my time doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's the same any aspect of the business. The reason you don't look to HubSpot for that help is because you do the sales, like you do the marketing, you do these things, right? But that doesn't mean you should be doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're often not an expert at, let's say sales processes. You're an expert at your product and your customers,
Mm-hmm.
right? So get help in these other spaces. It doesn't have to be, all on you. As soon as you've like kind of shed that weight and that responsibility, that forces you to build it in a way that now we can bring more people in
Yep.
to do it and help you, right?
Exactly. And even if you are good at doing whatever that is, whether that's marketing or sales or some of these other facets tied to the business, chances are bandwidth is going to be your limiting factor. And again, that's where this operationalizing things and building out the strategy to enable that operations and the technology to help support it is going to help you, because you will be able to spend less time doing more And in addition to that, you'll have prioritized what you want to focus on versus what can be handled later. And that's really like the key piece that I want to leave with, at least for today, because I know that there's so much more that we can cover. But if there's one thing to kind of take away, it's to focus on one, defining your unique value proposition for your business. And then once you've done that, figure out your binary logic of what do you focus on and what do you not focus on. If you take those two things, you can build anything in your company, period. It doesn't matter what it is. You just know, okay, what is my North Star? Great. What do I care about? What do I not care about? And then based off of that, it's different branches as you get lower and lower. It's all you need to think about, and you'll be in a good place.
Indeed. I don't think we need to dig in too much more. This is a great episode. I'm gonna love this journey. Uh, plain as day, building this foundation for people, and building on top of it as we go. It's gonna be fun. So hopefully, you guys found this valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Give us feedback. What are we missing? What do you want more of? All of that is super appreciated. And until then, think about these processes. Think about those process gaps. They're there, right? Think about
Don't
them
forget
as
about the
more than,
strategy or the technology.
yeah,
And yeah,
think
if you
about,
have questions, like Chris mentioned, keep checking in over us with Let's Build. We have Cartographer that's continuing to spin up. That's a bit more written form for those of you who don't like watching these longer episodes, which is totally fine. And yeah, more will be coming.
yeah. So in the meantime, find those opportunities and let's
Mhm.
grow. Have a great day,
Cool.
everybody.
Take care, everyone. That was fun.
Yes, it